Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. Tonight, we're not talking about grand battles or forgotten philosophies, but something far more intimate, something that whispers from the dust of ancient tombs and bustling marketplaces, the very first locks and keys. We're prying open the surprisingly ingenious world of ancient security, a time when keeping your treasures safe wasn't about digital codes or fingerprint scanners, but about cleverly carved wood, intricate metal, and the sheer human desire to say, "This is mine." Keep out. So, before we unlock these ancient secrets, take a moment to like this video and hit that subscribe button, but only if you genuinely enjoy these journeys into the clever and often overlooked corners of human history. And, as always, I'd love to know where you're tuning in from and what time it is in your part of the world. Drop a comment below. It's always amazing to see our global community connecting through these stories. Now, dim those lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft, almost tomb-like background hum. And let's ease into tonight's fascinating exploration of ancient locks and the eternal quest for security. Long before encryption keys and surveillance cameras, there was a simpler, more fundamental concern. How do I keep my stuff safe from nosy neighbors, wandering animals, and ambitious thieves? As human societies shifted from nomadic bands, constantly on the move, to settled civilizations with permanent dwellings and accumulating possessions, a whole new set of problems arose. With possessions came the anxieties of ownership, envy, theft, and the pressing need to secure what was valuable. The instinct to protect what we cherish is ancient, primal even. Once humans began storing surplus food, precious tools, sacred ritual items, or personal treasures in permanent dwellings, temples, or granaries, they immediately faced the challenge of safeguarding them. But how do you guard something when you can't stand watch over it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week? The answer, born of necessity and ingenuity, was to invent a mechanism to do it for you. The earliest known attempt at creating a mechanical security device dates back to the dawn of complex societies in ancient Egypt, roughly 4,000 years ago. And what's truly astonishing is not just that these ancient people had locks, but that the fundamental principles behind their invention are still echoed in the locks we use today. The Egyptian wooden pin lock was a marvel of early engineering, a testament to human cleverness emerging from the Nile Valley. It typically used a large wooden bolt fitted with a series of precisely drilled holes on its upper surface. Within these holes rested a set of loose wooden pegs or pins, held in place by gravity, their lower ends dropping into corresponding slots carved into the door frame itself. This simple yet effective design prevented the bolt from sliding open. To unlock it, you needed a key, often a large, rather cumbersome wooden tool, almost like an oversized, flattened toothbrush, with its own set of pins that precisely matched the pattern of those in the bolt. When this specific key was inserted into a slot in the bolt and lifted, its pins would raise the internal pegs just enough to clear the doorframe slots. Once aligned, the bolt could then be slid open freely. Remove the key, and gravity would do the rest, the pins dropping back into place, securely relocking the door. This wasn't some rare, royal novelty reserved for pharaohs. These locks were surprisingly common, used on storage rooms protecting grain and valuables, on the imposing entrances to tombs meant to guard the dead and their treasures for eternity, and even on the gates of temples, safeguarding sacred spaces. They were often installed vertically, sometimes concealed on the inside of doors, making them harder for would-be thieves to tamper with from the outside. While they may seem primitive, compared to the intricate metal mechanisms of later ages or the digital security of our own, the brilliance of these early Egyptian systems lies in their underlying logic. They weren't merely brute force barriers. They were puzzles, mechanical riddles, and like all good puzzles, they effectively challenged, and usually defeated, the uninvited. What's more, these simple wooden locks reveal something deeper about the people who meticulously crafted and used them. They didn't just instinctively fear theft. They anticipated it with rational thought. They planned, they innovated, and they invested considerable time, skill, and resource in protecting the things that mattered to them. And in doing so, with nothing more than wood and ingenuity, they laid the foundational principles for an entire field of human innovation that continues to evolve today, the art and science of security. So the next time you casually lock your front door, take a moment to remember, you're not just turning a deadbolt, You're participating in a tradition that began thousands of years ago, with ancient hands, driven by a timeless human truth. Some things are profoundly worth guarding. The Egyptian wooden pin lock wasn't just the world's first known mechanical lock. It was the direct ancestor of nearly every pin-tumbler mechanism that secures our homes and possessions today. Simple, elegant, and surprisingly effective for its time. It served the temples, homes, and granaries across ancient Egypt for centuries. A silent guardian born from wood and ingenuity. And it all started with a few meticulously carved pieces of timber, a bit of clever design, and that deep, enduring human need for privacy and protection. Imagine a large wooden door, perhaps a heavy plank door leading to a storeroom filled with grain, or the entrance to a private chamber within a bustling household. This door wouldn't have the sophisticated hinges we're used to. It might pivot on posts or simply be a heavy barrier. On the inside of that door sits a substantial wooden bolt that slides horizontally to block the entrance. But the real genius is hidden. Embedded within the upper part of that bolt are several precisely drilled holes, and inside each hole rests a small, loose wooden peg or pin. These pins, under the force of gravity, drop down into corresponding slots or holes meticulously cut into the doorframe itself, effectively preventing the bolt from sliding open. The door's locked. Now, here's the magic. The elegant solution. The key. This wasn't a small, pocketable piece of metal. The Egyptian key was often a large wooden implement, sometimes L-shaped or resembling a modern toothbrush with its bristles replaced by strategically placed wooden pins. These pins on the key had to perfectly match the positions and lengths of the pins resting inside the bolt to unlock the door. You'd insert this key into a slot in the bolt. As you lifted the key, its pins would engage and push up the internal pins within the bolt, raising them just enough so their lower ends cleared the slots in the doorframe. Once these internal pins were lifted clear, the bolt could be slid open freely, granting access. Remove the key, and gravity would immediately pull the pins back down into the frame holes, relocking the door with a satisfying, secure thud. It was, in essence, mechanical memory without the need for springs or complex gears. Just wood, weight, and human cleverness. What made this ancient system so impressive was its remarkable balance of relative simplicity in construction and considerable reliability in function. It was relatively easy to craft using locally available materials like acacia or sycamore wood, yet it was surprisingly hard to bypass without the correct, uniquely patterned key. And since each lock was typically hand-carved, with slight variations in pin placement and length, keys weren't easily interchangeable. Your lock was uniquely yours, a personal security signature. These pin locks weren't reserved just for the pharaohs or the high priests either. While the most elaborate and largest versions might have guarded temple treasuries or royal tombs, simpler forms were likely used by ordinary Egyptians to secure their homes and storage. Archaeological findings at sites like Deir el-Medina, the village of the tomb builders, and even later sites influenced by Egyptian culture like Nineveh in Mesopotamia, and later Persian and Assyrian locations, show that this locking concept spread widely across ancient civilizations. Egypt may have conceived the idea, but the lock, it seems, had legs, traveling along trade routes and through cultural exchange. Beyond their purely practical use, these locks also carried significant symbolic power. In the context of tombs and sacred buildings, locking something wasn't just about physical protection from robbers. It signified reverence, a sense of the sacred, finality, and the profound belief that certain spaces or objects should remain untouched, undisturbed, unless one was deemed worthy enough or ritually pure enough to possess the key. Security in ancient Egypt wasn't just a function, it was a statement, a tangible boundary between the mundane and the mysterious, the profane and the sacred. While Egypt gave us the earliest known mechanical locks, a testament to their skill with wood and precision, ancient Mesopotamia pioneered a very different, yet equally sophisticated form of security. This system relied less on intricate mechanics and more on indelible identity and the social power of a personal mark. In the land between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, where the Sumerians, Akkadians, Babylonians, and Assyrians built their sprawling city-states and empires, security wasn't primarily sealed with bolts and tumblers. It was pressed into soft clay, imbued with symbols of authority, personal identity, and unbreakable trust. The people of Mesopotamia developed a remarkably effective method of securing goods, not necessarily by physically locking them away from determined intruders, but by making any unauthorized access visibly, undeniably impossible to hide. How did they achieve this? With cylinder seals. These were small, intricately carved stone rollers, typically made from materials like lapis lazuli, carnelian, hematite, or steatite, each engraved with unique images, cuneiform inscriptions, or complex mythological scenes. These seals were more than just pretty objects. They were powerful tools of administration and security. They were rolled over a wet clay that was used to seal containers, such as jars of grain or oil, to close storeroom doors, or even to secure official documents like contracts or letters written on clay tablets. Think of it as an ancient combination of a personal signature, a tamper-evident wax seal, and a uniquely identifying barcode, all rolled into one elegant cylinder. Once impressed into the soft clay, the seal left behind a continuous, repeating pattern that was distinctive to the owner and could not be easily duplicated or forged. If someone tampered with the seal, if they broke the clay to open the container, unlatched the door, or unwrapped the tablet, it was immediately, glaringly obvious. The broken clay itself told the story of the intrusion. This approach was both beautifully simple and profoundly effective. In a world without padlocks or sophisticated alarm system, it focused on deterrence through visibility and accountability. The seal didn't physically stop you from opening something if you were determined enough. Rather, it announced to the world unequivocally that you had opened it, and that there would be consequences. High-ranking officials, powerful merchants, temple priests, and even private citizens of standing all had their own personalized cylinder seals. These weren't just administrative tools. They were symbols of status, authority, and legal identity, often passed down through generations as precious heirlooms. Such was the prestige and personal connection associated with these seals that some individuals were even buried with them, carrying their mark of identity and authority with them into the afterlife, perhaps to seal their passage or to identify themselves to the gods. But Mesopotamian security wasn't solely reliant on clay seals. They also secured temple treasuries, royal storehouses, and granaries using intricate systems of rope bindings. These ropes, often made of flax or palm fibers, would be tied around doors or container lids with complex, specific knots. These knots would then be covered with a lump of clay, which was then impressed with a cylinder seal. To access the contents, one would have to either cut the rope or break the seal, both actions leaving clear evidence of tampering. The idea was always the same: make the risk of exposure, the social and legal shame of being caught, far more terrifying than the potential reward of the theft itself. This concept of security as accountability, of directly linking access and responsibility to a person's unique identity and their standing within society, would echo for millennia. Even today, in our digital world, we log in with unique usernames and passwords. We verify transactions with digital signatures, and we rely on auditable records more than physical locks to secure vast amounts of information and wealth. In Mesopotamia, to protect something valuable wasn't just to keep it hidden or physically barred. It was to publicly, and often divinely, proclaim who had the legitimate right to touch it, and to ensure that any transgression would be known. As ancient Greek city-states like Athens, Corinth, and Sparta rose in wealth, trade, and social complexity, so too did their need for personal and public security. From the state treasuries housed within sacred temples to the coin-filled storerooms of merchants and the private homes of citizens, the Greeks faced the same age-old challenge that had confronted the Egyptians and Mesopotamians. How do you keep valuable things safe when you can't always be there in person to guard them? Surprisingly, given their later reputation for philosophical and mathematical brilliance, the early Greeks were somewhat slower than their Near Eastern neighbors in developing and adopting sophisticated mechanical locks. Instead, for a long period, they leaned heavily on a combination of trust, strong social norms, well-built physical barriers like sturdy doors and walls, and sometimes cleverly designed, though still relatively rudimentary locking devices. One such early innovation, common in the Greek world, was the bar and pin lock, used mostly for securing doors of homes and chests containing valuables. This mechanism typically consisted of a heavy horizontal wooden or metal bar placed across the inside of a door. To operate it from the outside, A large, specially shaped key was inserted through a hole in the door. This key, often a long, flat iron rod bent at one end into a shape resembling the letter L, F, or P, was designed to engage with and lift the internal bar, or sometimes to disengage pins that held the bar in place, thus allowing the door to be opened. These keys were often quite large and not particularly discreet. In fact, some surviving examples are almost as long as a human forearm. Carrying such a key around made it quite obvious that you had something valuable to protect and that you were a person of some means. But Greek keys and locks weren't just functional pieces of hardware. They also held considerable cultural and symbolic significance. Being entrusted with a key was a powerful symbol of authority, trust, and responsibility. In Homer's Odyssey, for instance, Penelope, the faithful wife of Odysseus, is described as holding the key to Odysseus's storeroom, a clear symbol of her stewardship and power within the household during his long absence. However, these early Greek locks, while ingenious for their time, had their limitations. They were often crudely made compared to later Roman innovations, could sometimes be forced open with enough determination, and their security often depended more on the physical size and strength of the bar than on the subtlety or complexity of the key mechanism. Consequently, what truly kept valuables secure in many Greek city-states was often a combination of factors: concealment of valuable items, the presence of human guards, slaves, or hired men, strong community ties where theft was heavily sanctioned by social shame, and strategically layered access within homes and public buildings. Temples and state treasuries, for example, didn't just rely on a single lock. Rooms containing sacred offerings or public funds might be sealed with intricate rope bindings and multiple wax seals, each requiring the presence and authority of several different officials to open. This created a system of checks and balances. Even private homes were designed with security in mind, often built around a central courtyard with limited external entry points and strong gates that could be heavily barred from within. Wealthy households would certainly employ trusted slaves or hired guards to watch over valuable possessions, adding a crucial human layer of protection to complement the relatively simple mechanical devices of the era, while the Greeks, particularly Athenians, deeply admired Metes. Cunning intelligence and cleverness. They didn't initially channel this ingenuity into advanced lockmaking to the same extent that later civilizations like the Romans would. They were more focused on the security of the police city-state as a whole, through walls, armies, and naval power. Nevertheless, they laid important cultural groundwork for the future of security. They reinforced the idea of keys as potent symbols of status and access, the notion of access itself as a matter of trust and responsibility, and the understanding that true security often arises from a careful balance between physical strength, clever design, and strong social controls. If the Egyptians gave the world the foundational concept of the pin-tumbler lock, and the Greeks wove trust and social status into the very fabric of their security traditions, it was the Romans who truly elevated lock-making into a widespread, practical art form, driven by their metallurgical skill, their obsession with order and administration, and needs of a vast, sprawling empire. With their renowned engineering prowess and sophisticated bureaucracy, the Romans brought unprecedented precision, portability, and innovation to ancient security, and remarkably, many of their ingenious ideas still echo through the design and function of modern locks today. Roman locks were primarily crafted from bronze and iron, robust metals that allowed for much greater durability, smaller sizes, and far more intricate internal designs than their earlier wooden counterparts from Egypt or the cruder iron locks of Greece. They readily adopted and significantly improved upon the Egyptian pin-tumbler principle, miniaturizing it, refining its mechanics, and in some cases, completely reinventing how it operated within a metal casing. Roman locksmiths became masters of the warded lock. This clever design used a series of internal obstacles, or wards, carefully arranged within the lock mechanism, only a key with a precisely shaped bit, featuring notches and cuts that perfectly corresponded to these wards, could rotate past them to engage and retract the bolt. This meant that simply inserting any pointed tool or a roughly shaped key wouldn't work. The key had to be an exact match for the lock's internal labyrinth. This innovation dramatically increased the security of Roman locks. Their keys, by the way, were marvels of craftsmanship in themselves, fashioned from iron or bronze. Roman keys came in an astonishing variety of sizes and styles. There were large, heavy, staff-like keys used for city gates or temple doors, requiring considerable strength to turn. But there were also small, finely crafted ring keys, designed to be worn directly on the finger like a piece of jewelry. These ring keys weren't just elegant status symbols, though they certainly were that too. They served a highly practical purpose, offering constant, convenient access to locked chests, document boxes, or personal cabinets without the need to carry a bulky set of easily losable tools. It was a perfect Roman blend of status, security, and utility, all wrapped around a finger. But the real genius, and perhaps the most theatrically Roman aspect of their security, came with the development of Roman puzzle locks. These were complex mechanisms, often hidden inside ornate metal boxes or chests, where opening the lock wasn't a simple matter of inserting and turning a key. Instead, they might require pressing hidden latches in a specific sequence, sliding concealed panels, or turning dials to a particular combination before the main locking mechanism could even be accessed. These were used not only for securing exceptionally valuable items, but for safeguarding important documents, religious relics, or even, as was a favorite pastime in the more dramatic circles of Roman political life, stashes of poison. Romans also institutionalized the use of locks on an unprecedented scale. Public banks, argentarii, imperial granaries, merchant strongboxes, and military armories all relied on robust locking systems. Doors in wealthy homes were fitted with metal facing plates to prevent them from being easily forced. City gates had massive locking bars, and in a darker application, even slaves were sometimes controlled with iron collars that had intricate locks, the keys to which were held only by their masters. A chilling reminder of how security technology can also be a tool of oppression. To the Romans, a lock wasn't just a passive tool. It was an active statement. It declared ownership, asserted authority, and enforced exclusion. And in doing so, it helped give rise to the idea that a truly civilized and ordered society needed more than just strong walls and vigilant legions to protect it. It needed systems, rules, and reliable mechanisms to safeguard property, power, and secrets. While the West, particularly Rome, was forging a future of intricate metal locks and keys, ancient China was taking a different, though equally ingenious, path. Chinese engineers and artisans, ever pragmatic and often guided by philosophical principles of harmony and balance, developed locking systems that were typically simple in their core mechanics, remarkably durable in their construction, and frequently imbued with deep symbolic meaning. For the ancient Chinese, the design of a lock didn't just serve to protect an object. It often carried a message, a blessing, or a warning. The most common and enduring form of ancient Chinese lock was the sliding bolt lock, a mechanism typically made from bronze or, less commonly, iron. These elegant and often beautifully crafted locks usually consisted of a hollow metal case which housed a sliding bolt. This bolt was secured in place by one or more spring-loaded tumblers or pins that would drop into notches in the bolt when it was closed. To open it, one needed the correct key, usually a flat, often decoratively shaped metal stick with precisely cut ridges or indentations along its length. When this key was inserted and pushed, its ridges would align and lift the spring-loaded tumblers out of the notches, allowing the bolt to slide freely and the lock to open. Does that sound familiar? It absolutely should. The core principle behind the modern pin tumbler lock, the very mechanism that secures millions of doors today, was already alive and well in Han Dynasty China, as early as 200 BCE, if not before. Unlike many of the larger, more imposing Roman locks, which often featured prominent external keyholes and sometimes ostentatious decorative flair, Chinese locks tended to be compact, discreet, and highly portable. Many were designed as padlocks, used to secure chests, gates, jewelry boxes, small cabinets, and personal doors. The emphasis was clearly on efficient function and reliability, rather than just overt displays of strength or status. Though the craftsmanship could be exquisite, but Chinese locks were often more than just clever mechanical devices. They were frequently imbued with cultural and spiritual symbolism. They were often cast or engraved in the shape of animals, each carrying specific connotations, tigers for protection and ferocity, dragons for imperial power and good fortune, turtles for longevity and steadfastness, or fish for abundance and prosperity. A lock shaped like a carp might be placed on a money box, symbolizing wealth. A dragon-headed lock on an important door wasn't just for security. It served as a potent warning to intruders that a powerful force, perhaps even an imperial one, guarded what lay beyond. Locks also played significant ceremonial and social roles in ancient China. During wedding ceremonies, for instance, intricately designed love locks were sometimes used to symbolically bind together chests or boxes containing gifts or dowries, representing the unbreakable bond and fidelity of the new couple. The key would then be handed over as part of the marriage ritual, a tangible gesture of trust, shared future, and mutual commitment. Some locks, particularly puzzle locks, which became a refined art form, were designed with deceptive complexity to confuse and frustrate would-be thieves. They might have hidden mechanisms, false keyholes that led nowhere, or require a specific, often counterintuitive sequence of pushes, pulls, or turns to open. These weren't necessarily harder to break with brute force, but they were designed to buy precious time and exploit a thief's impatience or lack of understanding. In ancient times, delay and confusion could be the difference between a foiled theft and a successful one. Ultimately, Chinese security culture wasn't primarily built around the brute denial of access, as was often the case in the West. Instead, it sought a harmonious balance between practical utility, symbolic meaning, and clever, often understated, design. In that subtle blend of form and function, Chinese artisans developed a quiet yet profound legacy of security, one that continues to resonate in the intricate beauty of their traditional locks and the symbolic rituals that still surround them to this day. In ancient India, the approach to security was, like many aspects of its rich civilization, less about brute physical force and more about layers of clever concealment, symbolic barriers, and a deep understanding of human psychology, often blending the spiritual with the ingeniously practical. Indian locks and security measures weren't just meant to physically keep people out. They were often designed to confuse, mislead, deter, and spiritually warn, sometimes integrating secret latches, false compartments, or sacred inscriptions to elevate the act of protection into an almost philosophical practice. One of the standout features of traditional Indian lock-making, particularly evident in the intricate designs of chests and strong boxes, was the sophisticated use of deception. Puzzle locks and trick mechanisms became highly developed, not always to prevent brute force entry entirely, though. Some were incredibly robust. But to make unauthorized access so complicated, time-consuming, and mentally frustrating that it would discourage all but the most determined or knowledgeable intruder. Some locks required multiple, non-obvious actions to open, perhaps pressing a hidden stud in one location, then sliding a concealed panel in another. And only then would the actual keyhole be revealed, or the main mechanism disengage. Others had decoy keyholes that served no purpose except to waste a thief's time and tools. Temple security, in particular, saw some of the most intricate and layered applications of these principles. Temples in ancient and medieval India housed not only sacred idols, but also vast treasures. Offerings of gold, silver, gemstones, sacred texts, and revered relics. Instead of simply hiding these valuables behind massive locked doors, temple priests and architects often employed a system of layered security, which was as much ritualistic as it was physical. A sacred storage area, or garbhagriha, inner sanctum, might be sealed with heavy doors, but also with wax seals impressed with temple insignia, intricately knotted ropes that followed specific religious patterns, and sometimes stamped clay emblems, each element bearing significant spiritual weight. Breaking such a seal wasn't just a common crime like theft. It was considered a sacrilege, an affront to the gods that would bring divine retribution. The locks themselves were frequently masterpieces of metallurgy and craftsmanship, often engraved with potent religious imagery, elephants symbolizing strength and wisdom, lotus flowers for purity and enlightenment, fierce deities acting as guardians, or protective mantras. Sacred verses inscribed in Sanskrit. These were not merely decorative elements. They were intended to intimidate the superstitious or the impious, and also to imbue the locking mechanism itself with a kind of symbolic, spiritual armor. To touch such a lock with ill intent was, in many cultural contexts, seen as an act that directly challenged the divine order. In the bustling trade routes and royal courts of ancient India, and among its wealthy merchant classes, small, portable locks were widely used to secure scrolls, valuable trade goods in transit, personal jewelry boxes, and private doors within larger households. These were often crafted with great skill from iron or brass, designed to be both lightweight for portability and durable enough to withstand tampering. Key design was often highly individualized, sometimes so unique that a single master artisan was responsible for crafting both the lock and its perfectly matching key, ensuring a high degree of security through the sheer obscurity and precision of the mechanism. And just as in other ancient cultures, locks in India sometimes carried important ceremonial roles. In marriage rituals, for example, the symbolic unlocking of a sealed chest or box by the groom might represent not just access to material wealth or dowry, but the formal transfer of trust, the unveiling of a shared future, and the sanctification of the new household. For ancient India, the best and most effective lock didn't merely block an entrance. It puzzled the mind, it protected the spirit, and it whispered a timeless warning: only the righteous, the worthy, or the truly initiated may pass. As civilizations grew more interconnected and trade routes stretched like vast arteries across deserts, seas, and empires, the need for reliable, portable security became absolutely paramount. Whether it was a merchant's caravan laden with spices and silks inching its way along the Silk Road, a Roman general's war chest filled with campaign funds, or a diplomat's pouch carrying sensitive state secrets, ancient locks had to do more than just guard stationary temples or city doors. They had to travel, to endure the rigors of the journey, and to protect valuables in transit, often far from the owner's direct oversight. In the ancient world, particularly during the height of the Roman and Han Chinese empires, trade was booming on an unprecedented scale. Silk, a closely guarded secret of China, moved westward, creating immense wealth and desire. Spices, gemstones, and exotic woods flowed from India and Southeast Asia. Glassware, textiles, wine, olive oil, coins, and scrolls crisscrossed continents and seas. But with this explosion of prosperity and movement came an equally significant risk: theft. Bandits and pirates lurked on lonely roads and unguarded sea lanes. Dishonest porters, caravan drivers, or even crew members might be tempted to pilfer goods. And the very nature of long-distance travel meant that valuable consignments often changed hands multiple times, passing through numerous intermediaries in unfamiliar territories, all without their original owner being present to ensure their safety. The solution, once again, was the evolution of locks. Mechanisms that were compact enough to be carried, durable enough to withstand rough handling, and sophisticated enough to deter tampering. Roman merchants, who were masters of logistics and commerce, frequently used small but strong iron padlocks to secure their chests, saddlebags, and the doors of warehouses or rented storerooms in distant ports. These Roman padlocks often featured spring-loaded mechanisms and ingeniously designed ring keys, making them robust enough to resist casual theft or prying, yet lightweight enough for easy transport. Examples of these locks have been found across the vast expanse of the Roman Empire, from the misty frontiers of Britain to the sun-baked ruins of Syria, sometimes perfectly preserved in shipwrecks or rusted shut in buried hoards. Their widespread presence speaks volumes about a universal concern: the urgent need to protect mobile wealth and sensitive goods. Similarly, Chinese traders and imperial officials relied heavily on portable sliding bolt locks, often beautifully crafted from bronze, which were attached to travel chests, document boxes, or the carts that formed their caravans. Some of these locks were cleverly disguised, appearing as ornamental fittings or seamlessly embedded within the structure of the box itself. They frequently featured engraved symbols of good fortune, protection, or inscriptions marking ownership or the contents within. If someone dared to break such a lock, the act was not only immediately obvious, but it could be prosecuted not just as a common crime, but as a serious dishonor, a violation of trust that could ruin a merchant's reputation or an official's career. Even nomadic peoples, like those traversing the vast steppes of Central Asia, developed their own forms of portable security. These often involved intricate leather and metal clasp systems, where sturdy metal rings and cunningly designed latches could be tied or locked over tent flaps, horse packs laden with goods, and even cases for precious weapons or sacred items. While these systems might have been less mechanically complex than Roman or Chinese locks, they emphasized speed, visibility, and resilience. A traveler would immediately know if their goods had been disturbed. And on the battlefield, a theater of constant movement and shifting fortunes, locks were often used on vital weapon caches, treasury wagons carrying the army's pay, and the command tents where strategic plans were laid. In the unpredictable chaos of war, controlling access was absolutely crucial, not just to protect valuable resources, but to safeguard vital information. Sensitive scrolls, military maps, and diplomatic communications were sometimes sealed in heavily locked boxes, occasionally with multi-key systems that required the presence of more than one officer to open them. An ancient, analog version of today's two-factor authentication. Across all these diverse cultures, one common thread remained consistent. The more mobile and interconnected the world became, the more ingenious and reliable locks had to be. The open road brought unprecedented opportunity, but it also brought unprecedented risk. And ancient travelers met that challenge not just with swords and vigilance, but with the quiet, reassuring click of a well-made key in a sturdy lock. When we twist a key in a door today, or tap a complex code into a digital lock screen, we rarely pause to think of the thousands of years of quiet ingenuity, trial, and error that lie behind that simple, everyday motion. But every click of a tumbler, every latch that engages, every password that grants access, is part of an ancient, unbroken story. A story that began in the sun-baked dust of Egyptian temples, echoed through the bronze workshops of imperial Rome, and journeyed along the silent, perilous trade routes that stitched the ancient world together. The legacy of ancient locks is not just mechanical, it's profoundly psychological. These early inventions, from the simplest wooden bolt to the most intricate puzzle box, reflect something deeply, fundamentally human, our innate desire to protect, to secure, to exclude, and to define what is ours, what is sacred, or what simply needs to be kept safe from prying eyes or unwelcome hands. Whether it was a humble wooden pin lock in a Theban home, a sophisticated ring key unlocking a merchant's chest in Pompeii, or a symbolically carved puzzle lock guarding secrets in Chang'an, the underlying concept was always the same: to create a tangible boundary, a physical and often symbolic line that only the rightful person, the one holding the key or knowing the secret, could legitimately cross. And over time, these boundaries, these locked spaces, evolved into more than just physical barriers against intrusion. They became potent symbols. A heavy lock on a temple door didn't just secure gold and sacred relics. It preserved the sanctity of the space within, marking it as separate, holy, and not for the profane. A wax seal impressed on a scroll, secured with a locked clasp, didn't just hide the knowledge contained on the papyrus. It marked that knowledge as privileged, powerful, perhaps even dangerous. Even today, in our hyper-connected world, we unconsciously echo these ancient instincts. We speak of unlocking potential, of keys to success. We use locks to mark trust and intimacy. A locked diary holding personal secrets, a wedding chest symbolizing a shared future, a secure vault protecting family heirlooms. The mechanism itself may have become infinitely more advanced, the materials more resilient, the codes more complex, but the essential human meaning, the emotional weight, remains remarkably unchanged. In many ways, the most remarkable thing about the long history of ancient security is how little the fundamental principles have changed. Modern pin tumbler locks, the kind that secure most of our homes, still directly mirror the ingenious designs conceived by Egyptian artisans 4 millennia ago. Today's tamper-evident packaging, digital privacy seals, cryptographic passcodes, and even the complex security protocols of blockchain technology all echo ancient ideas, ensuring personal access, providing visible proof of tampering, and maintaining symbolic, often invisible, control over what is deemed valuable or private. But there's a philosophical twist to this enduring legacy too. Ancient locks, for all their cleverness, were never foolproof. They could be picked, they could be broken, they could be bypassed by a determined thief or a powerful enemy. Just as our most advanced security systems can be today, their true power, then and now, lay not just in their ability to physically deny entry, but in their capacity to declare and enforce boundaries. They told the world, clearly and unequivocally, "This is mine. This is protected. You do not have permission." And that psychological line, that assertion of ownership, control, and the right to privacy, more than any intricate mechanical part, is the timeless essence of security. From the grand tombs of pharaohs to the bustling trade routes of empire, from the sacred temples of forgotten gods to the humble doors of everyday homes, locks have always been about far more than just theft prevention. They are about control, identity, secrecy, and sometimes, in the harshest of worlds, about sheer survival. So the next time you slide a deadbolt into place, or hear the satisfying click of a safe locking shut, take a moment to remember, you're not just using a tool, you're participating in a story. A human drama written by kings and merchants, warriors and priests, artisans and innovators, each of them across millennia, trusting a small, ingeniously crafted piece of technology to hold back the world and to guard the things they held most dear. What an incredible journey into the often overlooked world of ancient security. It's amazing how these ancient inventors tackled problems we still face today. Which ancient lock or security system do you find the most ingenious or surprising? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to know what resonated with you. Thank you for joining me on this fascinating exploration. If you enjoyed unlocking the secrets of ancient security, please give this video a like. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next adventure into the hidden histories that shaped our world. Until then, keep your valuables, sir, and stay curious.